Hi, my name is Keegan, and this is Engineers in Automation. On today's episode, we're going to be talking with Sean Dotson. He's the founder and former president of R&D Automation. We're going to talk with him a little bit about starting the company, growing a business. We're also going to talk about what he's currently doing today, as well as other things in the automation industry, such as his likes, his dislikes, and some of the lessons learned he's had. Now, let's go talk automation. Hi, and welcome to today's episode. I'm your host, Keegan, and I'm here with Sean Dotson, the founder and former president of R&D Automation. Sean, welcome to today's episode.
Hey, Keegan. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. And let's just dive right into it. Can you give us a little bit of intro about yourself?
Sure. Yeah, I've been in the automation industry pretty much my entire career. Worked for an automation company for a while, and then founded R&D Automation about 18 years ago, and then sold it in 2020, late 2020, to a private equity firm. Stayed on with them for about a year and a half. And then in this last October, I exited the firm and one just to take some time off. You know, after 18 years of owning a business, there's lots of stresses, as most business owners know. But the other thing was just to look at what else is there in the industry. You know, what's my next adventure going to be? So that's kind of my history. Been very active in automation. It's been my career and my passion for pretty much my entire adult life. So it's once you get into it, it's kind of hard to get out.
Yeah, great. And hopefully we'll touch on some of the next steps that you're moving into. But briefly, let's how did you, get your background in automation? What, drove you to that?
hmm So I was always one of those kids who would, take apart the alarm clock or the old electronics. I remember my dad who was an electrical engineer, so I've got a lot of engineers in my family, so it probably was kind of built into the blood. But I remember I was taking apart an old cathode ray TV, and he freaked out because of the big capacitor on the back, and he had to explain to me how to discharge the capacitor. And so, I always learned that way. In high school, I worked at a hardware store, which was a great introduction to not only how to do home improvement projects, but just how things work, right? And solving problems. So people would come to you, even the simple problems. I gotta go from this 1 inch pipe to a half-inch pipe, and I gotta make a 90-degree turn. Just simple things like that. How do you solve their issues? So I really enjoyed that.
Yeah.
Went to college for mechanical engineering, just because I was always very mechanical in nature. While I was in college, I was put my way through college as an auto mechanic. So started off just changing batteries and tires, and worked my way up to brakes and struts, and just kind of kept going from there. So after I got out of school, I'd also done a lot of programming for not only robotics, but also I worked on some programming for this new thing called the World Wide Web. Back in 96, 97, it was kind of really in its infancy. So I actually thought I might end up going into that, and then decided I did not want to move to California and be in Silicon Valley. So got a job right out of school doing design work for a packaging company,
Wow.
and then kind of really fell in love with it. And then found another job at an automation company with robotics, which I did a lot of robotics studying back in college. And then from there on out, it was just, it became, a love of mine. Being able to see the fruits of your labor. So you come up with a concept, you actually build this machine, you install the machine, and then product is coming off the machine. I've always thought it was the coolest thing, walking down a store aisle and pointing to something and saying that came off the machine that R&D designed, or that I designed
Oh,
or
cool.
programmed or whatever.
Yeah, very cool. And can I just touch on as well, being a president of a large company like that, what made you want to dive into that realm of the business instead of just being an engineer and keeping and staying as a designer? What pushed you to say, hey, maybe I
hmm
want to try to, run the company or run a company?
Well, to be totally honest, unemployment. The company I was working for before R&D, we got bought by, we were acquired 3 times in like a 5-year period. We were then a very small piece of this very large global puzzle. and they decided that they had too many facilities and that our facility was one that was going to be shut down. I was running the facility at the time, so they basically said, "All right, it's your job to be the last guy out the door and lock it all up, and we need you to move the products all over the world and help people get jobs." So I did all of that, but as I was doing it, I said, "All right, I guess I got to get a job here eventually too." And I just decided, like, I really enjoy what I do here. I enjoy designing equipment and running this facility. Why don't I just kind of keep doing that? So I convinced them to basically, give slash sell the small automation company that was left over to myself and two partners. So we kind of went into it with that. Hey, we love designing equipment, we love programming equipment, but you also got to run a business. So it was a bit of baptism by fire. So I was just, dropped into this and started just figuring things out. So, one of the stories I tell is that I got a letter, from the county after like 6, 7 months going like, "Hey, you haven't paid your sales tax bill in 6 or 7 months." And I'm like, "I didn't know I had a sales tax bill." So that's when, yeah, oops. So that's when you call up the accountant and go, "What's this sales tax bill I got to pay every month?" They're like, "Oh yeah, use and sales tax." I'm like, "Oh, haven't heard of that one."
Yeah.
So a lot of the things you learn the hard way, but honestly, it's the best way to learn, right? Because those lessons really stick with you when you learn, the hard way, and then you become proactive.
And
Like,
especially
oops,
when it's with your own money, right?
yes, exactly. It's one thing, not paying a couple $100 worth of tax to the county. It's completely different when you're not paying thousands to the government, the federal government. So you start looking into federal taxes a little bit more then, right? So it causes you to really do your homework.
And you are a Florida boy. I want to touch on this. What are some advantages of being in Florida? Especially from an automation standpoint. Generally people are always thinking, the Midwest or, other parts of the South, Texas or, Alabama, South Carolina. But what are some advantages of being down in Florida?
Well, I mean, the biggest advantage, of course, is no snow. So I love playing in the snow. I don't like working in the snow. Yeah, I am a Florida boy, born and raised in Tampa, just north of Sarasota, and lived pretty much my entire life here, in Florida. Florida was one of those markets. Like when I worked for the packaging company, and then I found the job at the automation company, I was really surprised to see, oh, there's an automation company, in Florida. It's a service market. It's tourism and hotels and things like that. Agriculture. You don't think of manufacturing, but what I found out at the time, and which is growing to be even more and more true, is that Florida is a very manufacturing friendly state. Now, we don't have large scale, you're not making truck axles and train cars and, big foundries and things like that. But there are a lot of medical device companies. There's a lot of consumer products companies, electronics companies, what I'm going to call that high tech manufacturing. We used to do a lot of work back when NASA was launching the space shuttle. There were all these tier 1, 2, and 3 suppliers for NASA on the Space Coast. We did a lot of work for those companies. When NASA stopped launching the shuttle, a lot of those companies dried up, but now SpaceX and Blue Origins are back, and all those tier 1, 2, and 3 companies are starting to develop again. So, it's kind of that sleeper market. Back in the day, there wasn't a lot of competition. It was really, quite honestly, R&D and one other company that was pretty much sharing the state. Now I think we're up to 5 or 6 automation companies in Florida, and of various sizes, and growing. And people are seeing the Florida market as important by putting offices in South Carolina, Georgia, North Carolina. Again, pretty easy to get to Florida from those markets.
Yep. And so let's kind of touch on right now what kind of projects are you working on now? I know you said you've moved on from R&D, and what kind of projects? What's your next steps here?
Right. So right now I'm doing helping some manufacturers, some end manufacturers look at their processes to determine, hey, what needs to be automated? Do we need to automate? Should we automate? And just giving them some high level recommendations. Helping out a couple companies that are kind of out, that they're automation adjacent. It's machinery, but it's not necessarily automation machinery.
Right.
Helping them look at some of their processes as well, and maybe applying some of the lessons learned from automation machinery to this non-automation, machinery. Um, and then, of course, I'm also open to new C-level, VP level, opportunities at other organizations.
Okay.
I think I've always been on that integrator side. I think it would kind of be interesting to look at it from the other side, from the supplier side.
Yeah.
Maybe a robot company or a feeder company or something like that that's selling components that go into
Sure.
automation. But right now, I'm kind of keeping my options open and keeping myself busy a little bit. I don't even call it a podcast. It's I go hiking in the woods and I answer questions that people ask. It's automation AMA, and it's just something. Quite honestly, it's fun to do while I'm out in the woods, and
Yeah.
I like giving back to the community of my knowledge over the years.
And honestly, with that, that leads right into my next question. Um, I know that you have written some technical articles and articles on LinkedIn there, that engineering articles and things of that nature. Is that something that you also enjoy doing? Are we gonna be seeing more of those? I know you have about 15 out right
Mm-hmm.
now. Is that
Yeah,
something you're still going to continue to do now?
yeah, I will. It's funny. I said I went to school for mechanical engineering. I actually my first semester I was actually an English major, which people are always like, "What?" I always enjoyed writing. I thought that perhaps I might go, into doing writing of some sort. But I also had this technical background too, and always really loved engineering. And quite honestly, I started doing a little bit of research too on what an English major makes versus what a mechanical engineer makes, and that
Yeah.
helps. That is, I said, hey, I can always write on the side, right? So I've always enjoyed doing that. I've always just also enjoyed just giving back to whatever community I'm part of. And earlier in my career, I was very involved with 3D CAD with Autodesk.
Okay.
I did some consulting with them on their Inventor product from day one. So I was involved in Inventor for a long time. So people would ask me, questions about Inventor and how to do things, and then quite honestly, I got tired of answering the same questions over and over. So I kind of did a little write up and then I put it on a website and then I had more tutorials of how to do things and people would ask more and more questions. So then I started a forum back in the days when they had the web forums, right? And started those, and that got pretty popular as well. And then I got to the point where it became this whole community that I wasn't answering the questions all the time anymore. The other members of the community were answering the questions.
Wow, that's cool. That's cool.
So yeah, so I grew that up. So it's always been in my blood and always been in my nature to kind of help answer questions and do what I can to help other people maybe not make the mistakes I made or maybe make it a little bit easier on them.
Right. Yeah, and that actually is somewhat similar to my path as well. I think initially, if you would have told a my English teacher in high school that I would be, I think I've written almost 100 blogs now. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
they wouldn't believe me. I built a couple websites and did the whole thing on both of them myself. And just it's funny how this career can change your path so quickly and easily. And like you said, it's just fun sending out information, learning new things, sharing
Mm-hmm.
information, and learning from others. It's something that I've found is super fun, and I think it's really important too to learn from others who've experienced it. Right? If there's information that you could share, from growing your business that I could take into growing my business. I mean, that stuff like
Mm-hmm.
that is just so useful, and I find now, especially through LinkedIn and so many different connections I've made, and I'm sure same for you, there's just such a open network of people sharing ideas and
Yeah.
information now. It's
Yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah, networking has always been super important to me as well. That's why I've always enjoyed going to trade shows and going to
Yeah.
conferences like A3 and the robot forums and all. Um, just talking to people about their life experiences and sharing war stories and learning lessons from each other. It's just it's how you grow, as a
Yeah.
person, both professionally and personally. And it's always just been something I really love. I always said I'm an extrovert. I'm an extroverted introvert, really, because most engineers are pretty introverted. But
Yeah.
I at least I like talking to the engineers at least.
Yeah, right. Yeah, me too, having the same boat. And with that, so talking to those engineers, what are some of those things that you really like about the automation industry itself?
Um, Kind of going back to what I talked about a little bit before, it's nice to see what you've done at the end of the day, right? So, while I have tons of respect for my electrical designers and controls programmers and all that, I mean, I've done that stuff as well. The reason I went into mechanical was that you can't see the code, you can't see the electrons flowing through the wires. Super important, of course, you see the mechanics, you see the robot moving, you see the conveyor, you see
Yep.
everything. And that to me was just so rewarding of at the end of the day, seeing what I built, being on that factory floor,
Yep.
and helping a company grow. Early in my career when I explained, go to a cocktail party or a wedding or something like that, people ask what you do for a living. I say, well, I own an automation company. A lot of times, oh, you put people out of work.
Right,
Well,
right.
no, I've never sold a machine to a company that was reducing staff. It was companies that could not find enough people to produce their products.
Yeah.
That's the only way they could do it. And it elevated those assembly line workers or people who were manually putting things together. It elevated their talent, so now they are running the
Yep.
machine.
Becoming
When I come
robot
back,
programmers or PLC
yeah,
programmers or
exactly.
technicians, that kind of
Yep.
stuff.
And I would come back years later to a factory and see that same operator that was putting something together manually. Then we introduced a piece of automation, and now their new title was something like they maybe were maintenance tech or they were machine operators or something, and they were running multiple
Yep.
robot cells, and they had people underneath them as material runners moving material around. They were making sure all the machines were running well. So it was just those were relationships too that were really really, really nice that you got to see somebody develop over the years because of
Yeah.
something that your company did.
Cool. And so that's the positive side on, everyone's got their negatives in this industry. What are some of
Yeah.
your negatives within the automation industry?
Oh boy, we don't have enough time for all those. It's easier to complain, isn't it?
A short list of the good stuff and
Yeah.
a long list of the bad.
Yeah. One of the frustrating things, which is not going to be a surprise to anybody who's in the automation industry, is when you have a customer, you've presented a solution, you've shown them what the ROI is. You've shown them all the positives. It is just everybody in the room is in total agreement. This is the way to do this, and they just don't move forward.
Yeah.
It's frustrating. It's hard for me to watch a company make a bad decision. And it's frustrating. And of course, I mean, selfishly, yes, we want to sell the piece of equipment. We get that, right? But at the same time, it's like take that away from it. Here's all the advantages to you as a manufacturer. You're going to be able to produce more, faster, better, lower your labor
Changeovers.
costs,
Yeah.
changeover, whatever it happens to be. Why are you not doing this? And a lot of times it comes down to fear of making a mistake, and lack of education, maybe not understanding automation or understanding the return on investment. So I spend a lot of time with customers not talking about what robot we're going to use or what is the machine going to look like or exactly how many widgets it's going to poke out, but why are you waiting, right? Are you scared? Are you concerned that we're not going to do a good job? Are you concerned that you made the wrong decision? Let's just talk person to person. What is it that's preventing you from moving forward with this?
Yeah.
um
And usually it's not
and
money, right? The
it's
shot
never
the shocking
sales.
part is usually it's not
Yep.
money.
I had a sales coach many, many, many years ago, and his famous phrase was, "It's never about the dollars. Never.
Because they
It's
wouldn't have been out
never about the
looking.
dollars."
They have something somewhere saved for a project like this. They've already
Exactly.
done their own
Or they can,
internal estimates.
yeah. Or if you can show them that this has got a great ROI and double your production, they'll borrow money from somewhere, some other project,
Right.
or pull it away. Hey, we're saving you this labor. You don't need to pay that labor money anymore. There's the money for the machine. So yeah, it's never about the dollars. There's always something fundamental. Yeah, and usually it's emotional. that is the reason people are not moving forward
Yeah.
with a project. Now, if they go with a competitor, that's completely different. Maybe they had a better solution or a better price. But so often we see, I talk to my competitors sometimes, and I know those guys bid on the same job. And I'm like, hey, did either one of you get that job? They're like, no, neither one of us got it. I'm like, okay, then nobody did.
Yeah.
So, that's a chance to go back and talk to the customer and try to rekindle it.
And with that, I guess let's kind of touch on some of those lessons learned. What are some good lessons learned that you've had? You've, like I said, you've had opportunities to run organizations, do things on your own. What are some good lessons learned for people in the automation industry that you
Uh,
can take your knowledge and share?
yeah, that that's a lot. I mean, that could take a lot of time, but some of the fundamentals are um, sell your customer on your capabilities and fixing their problem. Providing a solution.
Yeah.
Quite honestly, a lot of them really don't care. I'm going to back away from this a little bit. They don't care about your technical solution as much as they care about solving their problem. You still have to
Right.
show that you do know you have the technical solution and you are technically savvy. But let's be honest, the difference between robot brand A and brand B is not going to make or break you a lot of times.
Right.
Um, you've got to show them that you are thinking beyond the scope of maybe just what their problem is. So I've told the story before of a customer brought me in and said, "Here's our problem," and I said, "Well, can you show me upstream?" They said, "That's not our problem." I'm like, just show me upstream, and we went upstream a few steps, and by solving that problem, it eliminated the problem downstream.
Oh,
They
wow.
didn't even need to buy. So it was a cheaper piece of equipment to fix the problem upstream than it was going to be downstream.
That's
So,
that's very good. That's a good thing to think about.
yeah,
Okay, not just looking at this bottleneck, but is there
right.
something causing
Yep.
it? If we do fix this bottleneck, is there something even slower up ahead or something slower behind, right? Is this
Exactly. Don't
truly your bottleneck or your,
exactly.
area
Right.
that you need to fix?
Ask a lot of questions, right? That's sometimes we were able to save people a lot of money saying, all right, you got this molded part, but there's no feature on it for us to be able to orient it. So we have to use a vision system to be able to orient it with a robot and all. It looks like you could add a little rib here to this plastic part, and then we could use a vibratory bowl feeder or something to
Yeah.
align the part. Could you do that? And sometimes they're like, yeah, sure, that's not a problem. The product's not finalized, or we can add that piece. Great, we just saved you a lot of money.
Yeah.
Other times, no. If it's med device, sorry, we're not changing that. Right? We can't get it
Right.
requalified. Okay, that's fine, but we tried to save you, some money by making you suggestions. Maybe for generation two, keep that in mind. So I think just being more than just a machine builder, you've got to be a provider of solutions, and a lot of times you got to push back a little bit too on the customer. No, we can't change this. Okay, I know you're saying that, but why can't you change it?
Yeah.
Explain to me
Right.
why so
Right.
I understand it, because you might find out that they really can change it. They just don't want to change it.
Right.
Which is again, you're giving them an option. We can save you some money by changing it, or it's going to be more expensive if you don't. I just want to make sure you understand that impact.
Yeah. Yep. No, very, very good insight. And I think I learned something there too. So that's good. Appreciate it. Um, let's touch on, if somebody is interested in getting into automation, what's some advice that you'd give? You've done a lot of different things in this industry and with your background, what's, some,
Right.
something that you would, want to advise somebody on.
Yeah, I always tell people if you want to get into automation, don't do something easy like brain surgery or alligator wrestling or something like that. It's a tough industry. It's rewarding. I think anybody who's been into it long enough will sit back and look at their battle scars and go like, why did I get into this? This is a tough industry, and it is. But I really think if you're passionate about it, though, all those scars fade away pretty quick. Somebody who's just getting into it. I mean, if we're talking about somebody in high school or college who's considering it, um, get as much hands-on experience as possible.
Yep.
So many engineers that I've hired over the years. didn't have, I was fortunate enough, like I said, working as a mechanic and in the hardware store, I at least had some hands-on knowledge. I had run a drill press, I had turned a lathe before, I had put piping together and done plumbing and electrical and stuff like that. So I had a little extra leg up. But I see a lot of engineers who really they come into really book smart, right? They are amazing when it comes to programming and CAD and things like that, but they've never ran a mill ever,
Yeah.
right? They don't understand that you can't have a square pocket necessarily. They just don't think about that.
Yeah.
They don't realize that if they broke this into two parts, it only needs one setup each, versus if we hog it out of one big piece of aluminum, it needs 6 or 7 different setups.
Yeah.
So I really think go do as many things as possible, program in as many languages as you can, get into wiring. Even if you're a mechanical engineer, understand the basics of electricity and circuits.
Yeah.
Vice versa, same thing. If you're electrical, understand pneumatics and understand some basic mechanics and things like that.
Yeah.
But go out and just do as much as you can. Get your hands dirty. Go talk to the assemblers and the machine builders. They are a wealth of knowledge. I have gotten dressed down, embarrassed, and cussed at by more than I can, more machine builders than I can think of. But that's how I learned
Yeah.
to design machines better, so they wouldn't yell at me because they couldn't reach that bolt. That was way up underneath the machine, right? So
right. Yeah, no, and I think that's a great point. I think that was one thing for me, at least, how you mentioned, reaching out and learning a little bit more electrical. That for me, I just didn't have that real experience that much, I guess, in college, and then in the real world, then I had to learn it, and that put me behind for a little bit, and then caught back up, and now I'm able to do things, even around my house now that makes it a lot easier than before not having any knowledge.
Right.
So I think that's also something, because just venture out, also not just within your field, but reach out into a couple different ones, and especially in automation, right? You could do some robot programming and electrical. You could do PLC, which is electrical with the robot programming. You could do all design work, like you mentioned, with some actual electrical, or even mechanical, and a bigger mix of things, I guess I'd say. So
some of the most successful engineers I've ever met are ones that are they're really good in one area and they're pretty good in a bunch of other areas, right? So you need to keep your skill set pretty wide. Again, I was the first one to say I'm not one that's going to sit there and do load calculations on an electrical panel and figure out thermal loading and do we need an AC in the enclosure or not. But I can troubleshoot a machine if I had to, just because I learned all that. So those are good skill sets to have.
Yes, especially in automation. And then on that, where can people reach out to you and find you?
Yeah, I mean, most people probably know me from LinkedIn, so you can find me, Sean Dotson, at LinkedIn. And if you want to get a hold of me by email, it's Sean at automationama.com. And the AMA is Ask Me Anything. It's an old term from Reddit years ago. People used to go on and they do an AMA about just whatever their field of expertise was. You could ask them any questions about that. So I kind of picked up on that, and so that's people feel free to reach out to me and ask me questions about automation and automation industry and where we think we're going. So again, I enjoy the conversations and the networking.
Yeah, well, hey, appreciate it. We'll put the links down below, and then I've been following you for a couple of years now, and yeah, you do post a lot of great information. So always good to give you a follow. I learn a lot almost weekly, it seems. So I know I appreciate it. But just want to say thanks for being on today's show. If you guys enjoyed today's show, please give us a like, comment, share, and don't forget to join us next time here on Engineers and Automation. Thanks.
Thank you.